Hello and welcome to Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. This is episode 208. We're recording here on the evening of April 13th on Sunday night as usual. How are things over on your end there, Mike?
Things on this end are doing okay, Russ. How's it going over there?
Doing pretty good here as well. It's going to be a cold night tonight.
Is it really?
Spring doesn't really want to jump out, even though the cherry blossoms are sort of past their peak here.
Yeah, I don't like being cold. I'm tired of being cold. It's been pretty cold this year, too. I mean, It doesn't get cold like it does in, say, like New York or Chicago, but you just always feel cold in these houses.
It's because it's damp.
It's damp, and it's also, they're not insulated, and there's no central heating here. So you got to heat each room sort of individually, carry your heater around with you. Or at least I do.
Yeah, and before you know it, it'll be so hot, and we'll be complaining about that next. So
I won't complain about that. I like the heat.
Oh, well, I don't like the wet heat we get in between.
I don't like the insects, but I'll live with them for the heat.
Changes of seasons and lots of other things going on. All right, before we get into the episode contents for tonight, I want to send out a special thanks to trombonist Robert Cosma for sharing our episode Bones and Blues from last week, in which we featured his recording Changes in Life. Go back and make sure you hear that if you haven't heard it. It was a really good recording. Alton Senkalar gave us a thanks for featuring his album too. 3 great trombone recordings on the jazz side last week.
It's good that he checks and he kind of writes it to us. It's really cool.
And tonight we've got an interesting program as well with a lot of variety.
A lot of variety and a lot of kind of rarities, too.
Yeah, in both the classical and jazz halves, and a big international mix of things as usual. In the episode description, as always, you'll find links to Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music for all of the music we're going to discuss. And at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist where you can get all the music in one place on Deezer, CD quality streaming music from France. And if you can't see the full description or recording list and links are hard to access wherever you're listening to us, you can always come over and check us out on our host site. That's Podbean, podbean.com. Everything's easy to follow there. If you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe wherever you listen to us and tell a music-loving friend. If you take a moment to give us a ranking or write a short review, that helps us get listed in the music category recommendations, and that helps us grow our audience as well. You can come follow us on Facebook to get extra info and more new releases throughout the week. I put up a couple there from Friday as usual. You can leave a message or comment there. And if you want, you can check us out on X as well. We're over there. Our ID is Adult Music Pod.
I've never posted on X. I should get over there and say something.
You have to be very brief if you post something there, but better than it used to be. But
that's my strength, is brevity. You might have noticed if you visit the Facebook site that I don't really get on the internet much during the day, so I don't really post anything there. I got to put some classical stuff up.
Yeah, put some classical stuff up there.
Yeah.
And if you want to contact us directly with any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. We're going to play music samples as we go along and talk about these 6 recordings tonight. And this is our fair use disclaimer. Music sample clips are for commentary and educational purposes. We recommend that listeners listen to the complete recordings, all of which are available on streaming services in the links provided. And we also suggest that if you enjoyed the music, you consider purchasing the CDs or high-quality downloads to support the artists. And we're going to start out in Lute land in the classical side tonight, Mike.
Yeah, we don't hear enough Lute. Concertos for Baroque Lute is the name of the album we're talking about here. Now, the pronunciation of Lute, I prefer Lute, but people will say Lute, but I think that's pretentious.
Lute? It's harder to say.
I'm not saying that. Anyway, the performer here is Miguel Rincón on the lute and Il Pomodoro, a really great Baroque ensemble. And this is on the Aparté label and released on March 21st. Now, the works on this album were written in the final years of the Baroque era by individuals who were at the forefront of the 18th century tradition in Austria and in German lands. Okay, so not in Austria and Germany, but Austria was kind of under the Habsburgs then.
Right.
Rincón says in his booklet note that he wants to restore the lute to its rightful prominence as a solo instrument in the Baroque tradition, because in late Baroque, the lute started to be eclipsed by other string instruments, frequently becoming relegated to accompaniment roles in ensembles or as part of a duo. And you can see why. I mean, the guitar especially is very portable. Yeah. The lute's portable too, but it's this gigantic thing and it has a load of strings. There was kind of a joke I saw on the internet where that you see this old, white-haired, long bearded guy playing the lute, and the caption said, "This man spent 80 years performing on the lute, and 60 of those years were spent tuning it." Yeah, because it has a lot of strings. It seems like it would be a real pain. The repertory recorded here on this album represents a bridge between the growing galant style, the Sturm und Drang, and the polyphonic richness of the Baroque. Now, Sturm und Drang would be excessive emotional states for the time. Now, please, if you're used to romantic era music from the 19th century, Sturm und Drang isn't that extreme.
Right.
It just got more extreme as time went on, and we had to pull more out of the expression of music. So this period of the Baroque represents a concluding chapter in the illustrious history of the lute before it ended up being completely ousted in favor of the classical guitar, which we still listen to today. But we listen to the lute as well. It's come back. There are a lot of great lute recordings that we've heard on this podcast.
Yeah.
So I really like the instrument, too. It's more gentle than the guitar, although the guitar can be gentle. Just, it's just got more sort of range to it.
I remember a late night lute.
That was a favorite of ours. We liked that one.
But this one is more going to get you in the morning mood here, I think.
I guess so. Okay, so tracks 1 through 3 are by a composer by the name of Carl Kohout, Kohaut. Lute Concerto in F major. That's all we know about it. There's no catalog number, no year. I don't know. Kohout was regarded by his contemporaries as the greatest living lutenist, and of course we've never heard of him. But this happens all the time. And when these people are alive, people will say this about him.
Right.
And then that just gets lost in history. So this concerto is in the galant style, which is more of a showy, surface level sort of music. It's not really going for the deep emotions. So it's entertaining. Anyway, track 1, the first movement, Allegro, starts with delicate interplay between the lute and strings. The sound on the strings is recorded very close and registers with great presence on the recording, especially in the bass, which practically bores out of the speaker. Yeah, it's really loud. It just sounds fantastic. It's got a nice cushiony feeling to it, supporting all the harmony. The lute enters in the range of the strings, so it doesn't stand out. But when he gets going with his figuration, the music sparkles in that range. Let's listen to the entry of the lutes, and you're not going to really hear it too well at first, but it'll come in. Oh, there's a great false cadence there when I was fading out. So Rincón has a light, pleasant way with the virtuosic passages, which are pretty rather than exciting, which is probably a feature of the lute's gentle tone. By the way, this recording is outstanding. Did you hear all the clarity and all the detail in that sample? Now, the lute, even though it's in the range of the orchestra where it starts, it stands out on the recording, and that's probably because there's a mic right on it. It's a nicely balanced recording. I doubt it would sound like this live. But anyway, Rincón gets a nice flow going in his arpeggiated figures in the second minute, and by the third minute we're already hearing the opening theme again. The movement passes pleasantly and quickly. At the very end, the lute gets an active solo passage without accompaniment. We're not used to hearing the lutes played this virtuosically in complete silence, so I found this passage interesting at the very end of that movement. Movement 2 is the Adagio, track 2. Here the lute is at the forefront with an expressive cantilena. The solo lute starts the movement, and we get a full feeling for its gentle tone. Yeah, very pretty, gently played. And man, what voluptuous tone we're getting on this recording. Great. Yeah. We get to hear a good deal of the lute's tone in this movement. You know what? I think I know why they say lute in English, because in Italian, the word is liuto. They're just kind of transferring that to English. But again, there are words that are pronounced like that in English. Rincón gets a lot of solo time in this movement. The instrument blends well with the strings, a context we often don't hear it in. There's a harpsichord providing continuo, usually the job of the lute. Rincón's playing is a real pleasure to listen to. The tone exposes the quality of the instrument, and in some of the more accented sections can temporarily sound like a guitar, depending on the range being played in. Track 3, the final movement of this 3-movement concerto. He's following the Vivaldi style here, and really concertos are still like this today. It's called Tempo di Minuetto. Kind of odd to end a piece with a minuet, but it is rhythmic, so the strings draw out the opening's lightly swaying Baroque dance quality. The lute also has a bit of a lift to it, and I rather enjoyed this. Let's hear a bit of that. Yeah, everyone's hearing the vividness of that bass and how it really just anchors the rest of the ensemble. Listeners, you can already hear this is just a great sounding album. I almost just want to stop doing this podcast and go listen to this album again right now. But let's keep going. We have some more good samples coming up. Rincón is sensitive to the subtleties of the dance rhythm in his playing, and the movement provides a pleasant conclusion to this light, enjoyable work. Yeah, all 4 of these works are going to be pretty light, but as you heard, they really just sound fantastic. Tracks 4 through 6, Bernard Joachim Hagen, Trio in E-flat major. Okay, we've got a texture change here. This is not a concerto. It's more of a chamber work. Hagen is known almost exclusively today from the archives of the Bayreuth Court Orchestra, and I've never heard of him personally. But this is a nice enough piece. It starts on track 4, the first movement, Allegro, and here the lute comes in sounding like a guitar in the accompaniment. I guess it's because of the lighter texture of everything, but let's give a listen to this. Yeah, you're right, Russ. This really is a good morning recording. It sounds like it'd be something nice to start the day with.
It's got a nice rhythmic energy throughout.
Right. So this work is a trio. It has a bit of a thinner sound than the concerti. Rincón shows great agility on the instrument, as though he's playing a guitar, and the movement itself is attractive and inviting, and rather Spanish-sounding in its timbre and occasionally its phrasing, though the trio parts are traditionally classical. Again, it's more of a soothing work than a riveting one. There's a sort of cadenza, a solo passage for the lute from around the 4-minute and 15-second mark that comes across poignantly, and I'm going to sample this part of the movement too, because we get to hear the solo lute here. You can imagine all the court ladies gathering around to listen to that. Sounds great. The movement moves towards its final cadence after that. Track 5, the second movement, Andantino. This movement starts with a descending two-note pattern with a strongly plucked yet gentle timbre from the lute. Yeah, it's a gorgeous melody, very sensitively played. The lute takes over the lilting melody at the 1 minute mark with occasional comments from the violin. The form is ABA, and at the end, the A theme repeats with busier articulation from the lute. From the final statement of the themes return to their original spare state. The lute gets a brief solo spot before the final cadence. And track 6, the third and final movement, Allegretto ma grazioso. There's an attractive grace to the articulation of the rhythm of this dance movement. Let's listen to this. I really love these dance movements. They have a kind of nice elegance to them. One of the things I love about classical music is it's one of the few places in the 21st century where you can find elegance. And I think it's something we miss a lot. I really love hearing it. Yeah, I really love hearing it in music. So I need those moments where elegance is communicated. And this is one of those movements. In fact, it's often communicated on this album. I found this movement immediately attractive in feel and melody. The form is a rondo with the main theme repeating after the very brief virtuosic departures by the lute. Tracks 7 through 9, we're back to the concerto. Jakob Friedrich Kleinknecht. Wow. Gotta say that name slowly. Lute concerto in C major. Most of the music of Kleinknecht that has survived is of chamber music for flute. Kleinknecht himself was a flautist. We don't know if this particular lute concerto is an original work by him or not, but it's the only work for lute that's attributed to him. It may very well be an arrangement of a work originally intended for the lute. Now, track 7, Allegro con brio. This is the first movement. We're back to the full string orchestra here. The movement begins with an upbeat, brisk theme played in the strings with harpsichord continuo. The lute is accompanying as well, and the lute solo entry is at 1 minute and 4 seconds, and it's shadowed by a violin, and I'm going to skip ahead to that section for this sample. Now, if this piece is originally for the flute, that's a pretty busy solo line for the flute. Sounds great on the lute, though. The vocabulary of this movement is that of the early classical era. It's got a pleasant, galant-style feel and predictability to it, and plenty of charm in Rincon's handling of the solo lute part. The lute gets a solo cadenza at 5 minutes and 45 seconds and comes across with plenty of grace and a bit of virtuosity as well. It's the instrument's gentle, mellow timbre that I focused on in this movement. Track 8 is the second movement, Andante di molto. The solo movement is in a mournful minor key. The lute comes in again after about the 1 minute mark with a more serious tone, but its timbre lightens the mood a bit, and I'm going to sample that entry as well. After the lute part, the opening theme is restated, and is more stately and decorous this time, with some of the heaviness lifted. In fact, the lute lightens the mood every time it comes in, so this is an interesting movement in that respect. After the lute's solo spot just before the end, the movement reaches its cadence in the minor key, with its opening mournfulness recaptured. Track 9, the third and final movement, Tantino Allegro e Grazioso. The third movement again has a graceful dancing rhythm. The lute comes in at 48 seconds and plays rippling figures, with the strings marking the rhythm, kept on the downbeat accents of the lute. Here I want to catch that rhythm with the strings and lute both playing, so I'm going to sample ahead at about the 2 minute mark. The movement continues in this way, with the lute constantly catching the ear with its graceful playing. I like the ending chord, which is taken with a quiet, light staccato. Tracks 10 through 12, Johann Friedrich Fasch. This is the only composer on this recording that I've heard of before. Lute Concerto in D minor. This is Fasch's only work for lute, and for that reason was probably prompted by a specific occasion. This would be a Sturm und Drang, or storm and stress work, whose goal was to express extremes of emotion in reaction to the perceived constraints of rationalism imposed by the Enlightenment. All right, because everybody's like thinking and everything is logical, and people wanted to break out of that after a while. This always happens. When things are good, you want them to be bad for some reason. I don't know. I just want them to always be good. But anyway, people are like that. Track 10. The first movement, Allegro. The opening has a pleasant bounce to it, good clarity of sound on the strings. The lute comes in at the 48-second mark with the theme and arpeggios. Again, the lute shows some guitar-like qualities in its tone in the mid-range. The entire movement keeps to the flow it had at the opening, with the lute taking different approaches to the material in each brief solo section. There's some attractive and sensitive accompaniment in the third minute that I'd like to sample. Let's hear a bit of this. and material leading to the final cadence follows this section. Track 11, Andante, the second movement. This is an andante that's longer than the first movement. There's a solo violin that briefly steps out of the texture at times. The lute strums along for the orchestral tutti, which has a water lapping against the shore feel to it. The theme finally reaches a cadence at 1 minute and 3 seconds, and a highly ornamented lute line comes in, shared with the strings. I like the way the bass here underlines some of the lute's harmony on the downbeats. Now, the bass is played very gently here, but it's so richly captured on this album that you really can't miss it. It really feels nice and cushiony, like a really soft sofa that you can sink into. The lute and orchestra alternate with the melody, one handing it off to the other and the other handing it back. It's an attractive movement. The lute gets a solo cadenza at the 4 minute and 30 second mark where we hear a bit of finger work, followed by an embellishment of the theme. I don't want to hear that solo lute again. Let's sample a little bit of that cadenza as well. I hate to take you out of that, but we're going on another harmonic excursion there. Rincón takes this all the way to a cadence at the 5 minute and 45 second mark. After that, the lapping rhythm of the opening returns to bring the movement to a close, and then we get to the final movement of the work and the album, the third movement, Un poco allegro. The rhythm is reminiscent of a polonaise and is a hidden homage to the Dresden court, where it was preserved. Fasch didn't work there, spending most of his professional life in Bohemia, so this was probably a commission. The electors at that Dresden court were also kings of Poland in the 18th century. The opening has a rather bold, straight-backed dance theme. The solo lute is in at around the 38-second mark, playing that opening theme in a gentler style. The movement moves like a rondo, with the opening theme returning between episodes, or perhaps it's a Baroque-style ritornello. I'd like to hear more of the solo lute, so let's sample his solo passage at the 2 minute and 30 second mark. After this particular passage, the strings come back in with the opening theme to bring the movement to a close. While none of these works are going to change our conception of the late Baroque, each one of them is a pleasant and welcome discovery, particularly in performances as well performed and recorded as these. The strings are very upfront, as is the lute, with the bass registering strongly as a sort of black sound blot in the bottom end. It sounds great, and anchors the harmony strongly. Miguel Rincon's lute playing is sensitive and precise without being showy. These really aren't showy pieces. They do have some virtuosity to them, though. And we do get to hear Rincon's virtuosity on this complex instrument with its numerous strings. The sound on the lute is full and clear and close. Here are 4 works to add to the growing catalog of Baroque music and performances that show them in their best possible light. This is such an excellent recording. I have to urge you all to hear it.
Definitely Rincon's lute has a pleasing sound. It's a really warm tone, and his playing is fluid. It doesn't sound like he's trying to do anything technical. It comes off with a great ease. And there's a lot of variety of expression on this recording. We heard some more sensitive spots, but overall it's kind of spirited, and the balance of the lute with Il Pomo d'Oro, the ensemble, is excellent. You can hear everything, and the bass really sticks out as we heard. I like the tempos too. They all seem to be very well judged. I know I've heard various works by Fash before for other instruments. I don't think I've heard any of these other composers like you mentioned. So this is all new to me. It was all really pleasant and just wonderful music, and the recording quality makes it really easy to enjoy. So if you like Baroque music and you think you like the little tone of the lute that you heard in the samples, it's definitely going to be a good experience to hear this whole recording.
Okay, but what did Mrs. Russ think?
I don't think Mrs. Russ heard this one.
Oh,
she complained about the long drum solos on the jazz half this week of the episode.
Those were awesome.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Next, we have a pianist we've heard before on this podcast. This is a recording of Prokofiev and Alexei Shor's piano concertos by Behzod Abduraimov on piano, with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra conducted by Vasily Petrenko, a conductor I happen to really like as well. So I was really looking forward to this album. Yeah, this is on the Alpha label. It was released on March 21st, 2025. And Abduraimov, we heard his album Shadows of My Ancestors back in 2024 in January 22nd. The episode titled Silk Road Trip, episode 149. And that was one of our albums of the year.
Yeah, that was really impactful.
Yeah. And now we got this, and I couldn't resist because he's playing Prokofiev's second piano concerto, my favorite of the 5. Oh. And I just love hearing these works. Do you have a favorite of the 5 concertos by Prokofiev?
No, but I'll talk about them all a little bit later, I think.
Oh, okay. One doesn't stand out. For me, I just love this one. Now, Abduraimov says he sees this pairing as an opportunity to present 2 vastly different emotional and philosophical worlds within the same album. And he's right. These are very different works.
True.
In fact, I'm kind of wondering whether they should be on the same album or not. But that's beside the point. We get to hear these 2 works, and that's always a great thing. The depth and complexity of Prokofiev's world against Shor's more lyrical and accessible approach. Okay, now Alexei Shor is a contemporary composer, and we're probably not familiar with him, but now I've heard this work. Anyway, let's start with Prokofiev. He's tracks 1 through 4, his piano concerto number 2 in G minor, opus 16. This work has a really interesting history because Prokofiev played it in Russia before emigrating, I guess, to France, and he left the score behind. It wasn't really well received when he first played it. I thought because he played it at some sort of like garden party, and it was a little too. It wasn't really a very quiet work, so the people there didn't appreciate it. But apparently, he left this in his house, and then somebody else moved in or took it over or something, and they burned the original score in the fireplace.
Oh wow!
Can you believe it? You see this, full score. Why wouldn't you save it? I don't know. I'd give it to some musicologist or something. But he had to rewrite it all from memory, and he did that, and that's the version we have here, and that everybody plays now. It kind of makes you wonder what the original one sounded like, because he reorchestrated this a bit.
Okay.
So the first movement is a 4-movement concerto, which is rather unusual. Concerti usually have 3 movements. The first movement is marked Andantino to Allegretto, so an introduction and a main section. This has a rather unusual structure, too. Now here, Petrenko has the opening strings tiptoeing through their pizzicati, and Abduraimov plays the gorgeous opening theme with arpeggiated bass, with a light touch, and plays with clarity. Now, I'm not quite hearing the magic rapness that this line can create, and you'd want to listen to Bavuzet and Beatrice Arana for that. Still, this is a well thought out gambit and leads into drifting material at 1 minute and 42 seconds effectively. Now I'm going to sample the opening. Let's listen to that. Yeah, that's a magical opening.
Yeah.
Now, Abduraimov uses the slightest bit of rubato when he plays the melody, and I really prefer Bavozet's way without the rubato. I thought it was more effective. Like the melody just comes across straight. No problem, though. This actually pays dividends the way Abduraimov plays it, which, as I'll explain. Abduraimov manages to make the entire piano part of this movement sound of a piece, like one thing inevitably follows the next, and I think part of that is because of that opening. That makes this performance deeply satisfying. I've got to say, the pacing set by Abduraimov and Petrenko has my attention. It's slightly on the slow side, but everything is articulated so clearly that I'm listening to the unfolding of the orchestration with fascination. There's an episode at 3 minutes and 40 seconds that gets into a Prokofiev spikiness, and it's a bit ironed out here. Abduraimov makes every line musical, and not all of Prokofiev's lines are musical. Petrenko brings calm to the quieter, drifting passages, such as the one we hear after the 5-minute mark. The opening piano theme returns at 5 minutes and 40 seconds, the piano line builds, and at 6 minutes and 34 seconds, we're in a cadenza, which in this piece takes the place of the development section. This is a really strange gambit. It's not a showy solo part, but more on the atmospheric side. It builds up tension in the thematic material, and you can hear how musical Abduraimov is at around the 7 minute and 45 second mark, where he's got fortissimo spiky material to play. It's like he can't make an ugly sound. He gets volume, but his musical sense smooths it all out. Well and fine, we're getting all the musicality out of this piece. Let's hear what I'm talking about here. This is at the 7 minute and 30 second mark. Now, up until those arpeggios that I just faded out on, I think the section preceding that should be loud and brash, and yeah, ugly. But he sort of makes it sort of pretty, or at least smooths out the ugliness a bit. The cadenza does reach a virtuosic peak in the 9th minute with cascades of lines and percussive attacks. A crisis seems to be reached at the 10-minute mark. A brief blast of brass rights the ship and leads to one more brief statement of the opening piano theme before the movement ends, and that's a really welcome thing to hear, too. Track 2, Scherzo, marked Vivace. The Scherzo is very brief at 2 minutes and 30 seconds after the 11-plus minute first movement. It's got a bustling quality, with Abduraimov playing along with the orchestra with beautiful tone. Let's hear this. That's one of those thankless piano lines where it's being accompanied by the orchestra and it's really hard to play, but you can't really hear it over the orchestra.
Yeah.
So, the pianist has to work hard and he doesn't really get the rewards. The speed keeps up throughout with the theme hurtling towards its goal. There are great cascading lines in the last minute that lead to a final emphatic chord. Track 3, the third movement, Intermezzo, Allegro Moderato. This has a big Russian sawed bass sound at the beginning of the movement. It's got a huge striding gesture. A clarinet plays an ostinato line. This movement sounds goofily ominous, if that makes sense. Listen to it and see what I mean. We didn't get to hear much of the piano in that solo, but if it were any slower, it would actually sound ominous. Kind of like the music you get when, Godzilla is coming out of Tokyo Bay to, trample Tokyo.
Right.
But the faster speed kind of makes it a little comical, let's say, in a kind of cynical way. Abduraimov puts across the character of the movement well through his sense of the rhythm. Again, the tempo has us glued to the musical events. Petrenko hits the right tempo, slightly slow and steady, and strongly articulated to get a hypnotic response from the listener. There's an ungainliness to the rhythm in this movement, which is captured here, but the musicians want us listening to the inventive lines and orchestration more than any rhythmic quirkiness, which nevertheless is put across. The piano plays a triplet pattern that gets picked up by the orchestra in the fourth minute. There are some odd Prokofiev in harmony and rhythm, bringing us lumbering to the ending, which is achieved after a decrescendo on a single piano note. Track 4, the finale, the fourth movement, Allegro Tempestoso. The movement starts rapidly with the piano traveling up and down the keyboard. Abduraimov lays down a theme at the 16-second mark. It's an exciting, energetic movement. At the 1 minute mark, there's a mechanical rhythm like a steam train, and I'm going to sample that. Yeah, dun-dun-dun, 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 kind of like a train on the tracks. Those mechanical rhythms were all the rage back then because industrialization was making new sounds and musicians were picking up on it and wanted to express the world that they lived in. This loses energy and vanishes, and it was starting to lose energy as we faded out. The piano plays isolated chords as a wounded bass line sounds. The piano gets an attractive, light solo passage with a hypnotic rhythm in the second and third minutes. It goes on, then takes a sudden detour 3 minutes and 36 seconds, after which the orchestra takes up the bass line. That bass line becomes a theme and sounds fully in the piano in the fourth minute. Abduraimov gets a full, sumptuous sound. I like the theme, which is Russian to my ear, so let's hear it. A Russian theme then emerges, setting the piano off on a quick set of patterns. A chord from the orchestra suddenly breaks up the activity, and the piano continues solo with chords and brief lines. A variation on the theme's shape plays quietly and distantly in the piano at the 7-minute mark. Piano figuration sets off the Russian theme I sampled earlier in the orchestra. This section loses steam and winds down, then a murky piano line playing quietly in the lower end is heard. The orchestra suddenly bursts out with rushing, urgent material. The piano tries to build to a climax, but is driven along by the orchestra, which eventually reaches its goal. It's followed by some piano chords, and the tonic chord is reached again with an accent. Tracks 5 through 7, Piano Concerto No. 1 by Alexei Shor. Shor was born in Ukraine, SSR in 1970, which is now modern-day Ukraine. And he's an American citizen now, I believe. He lives in the United States now. Shor says that his concerto is a personal work that reflects different stages of human life, representing the emotional landscapes he has traveled through. Track 5 is the first movement, Allegro. The opening has a Baroque string type of feel to it, though once the melody comes in, a bit of romanticism comes in as well. The piano's entry at 42 seconds reflects that opening melody. It's simple and sparsely harmonized, and it sounds rather light. Let's hear it. Yeah, light, carefree. You could even call the theme naive. The piano eventually gets to a new, equally simple melody at the 2-minute and 30-second mark, which he introduces solo. I have to say, after the Prokofiev, this feels like it's missing some parts. Prokofiev's score is much more filled out, both orchestrally and harmonically, especially harmonically. A bolder piano line comes into this work at the 3-minute and 30-second mark. There's a lot of sugar coating in this score, with attractive melody following attractive melody. Yeah, I would say Shor is more in the Rachmaninoff school, melodically, if not virtuosically, than in the Prokofiev school.
Yeah. I thought in the first movement, the themes kind of have a sense of classicism to them, but as it goes on, it becomes more and more romantic and Rachmaninoff, and maybe Mettner come to mind as well.
Right. The music also has a constant flow to it, moving from one theme and setting to the next. There's an attractive brass fanfare in the 6th minute, followed by some pianissimo playing by Abduraimov. By the 7th minute, we've heard so many themes that listening for how they will all be tied up becomes engaging for the listener. There's some powerful percussion in the orchestral crescendi, and these register really well on the recording. The piano is often left with an attractive solo melody with minimal accompaniment. Themes are repeated often in this section. They're easy to follow due to their memorability. At the 11-minute mark, the piano plays solo, probably a cadenza, but this one has no boldness to it. It's got a gently played melody. Let's hear a little bit of it. And again, at the beginning of that sample, you heard like a classically shaped melody and followed by a romantic figuration with the pedal. It's really interesting. He sort of combines the two styles. Polyphonic writing follows, and that brings us back to the Baroque, really, leading me to think that the Baroque was a big inspiration for this movement, despite its frequent, bold, romantic statements. The cadenza eventually winds up in romantic statements at the end. It reintroduces counterpoint to bring the orchestra back in for the end of the movement. The opening theme in the piano is now stated in a bold romantic style. Now, at the beginning, it was kind of more quieting, Baroque or classical, with an arpeggiated string line forming a bed. Swelling strings then continue the theme's B section. There's a big showy build up to the final chord, complete with timpani roll, which is a very romantic way to end a movement. Track 6, the second movement, Andante. The piano starts this theme solo and modestly as well. The theme sounds somewhat like Handel, or something that Handel would write. It comes out of that style, and one of the interesting things to listen for in this piece is the way a Baroque-style statement will suddenly morph into a romantic one. Let's hear the opening of this movement. Yeah, so that piano line started classically and dry. Then we had the more sustained notes with the pedal helping. It was romantic by the end. The piano gets a lot of solo time in this movement. By the second minute, we're back to Baroque styling. The piano then takes a languorous romantic solo. This happens again with the piano theme at 2 minutes and 58 seconds, sounding low-key and Baroque. The segment that abruptly starts at 4 minutes and 12 seconds is heavily romantic and has some Prokofievan modernist elements to it. At 4 minutes and 45 seconds, we hear a swelling string section played with heavily romantic sound, a theme we heard earlier that's shaped like it's a Baroque melody. The piano comes in solo for the calming ending. And track 7, the third and final movement, Allegro con passione. There's an urgent, striding quality to the opening rhythm. The piano comes in playing rapid arpeggio figures. The piano's figures become thematic, yet he's frequently playing at high speed with a light touch. Let's hear the rondo-like return of the opening theme at 2 minutes and 5 seconds. There's a big drum roll starting there, and the orchestra takes the theme over after this. The piano goes on a brief dramatic turn, and the theme is then repeated on the piano again. There's a big romantic build-up to the big ending. And that's the album. The Prokofiev Piano Concerto has a hypnotic quality with Vasily Petrenko at the helm of the orchestra, and Abduraimov takes a highly musical view of the work, which works well. He has a great sense of the work's proportions and gives a performance of the piano part that's of a piece. Each movement flows or rushes by with a sense that it knows where it's headed. Sometimes that's at the expense of drama, but by the same token, Abduraimov also won't allow the ugly parts to fully register as shocking. It had me hooked throughout, though. There are performances I prefer, but I really liked this and will certainly revisit it. I just like Abduraimov's musical personality and overall sound. Now, the Shor Concerto is full of highly attractive melodies. The interesting thing about it is the frequent shift between playing styles while a single melody is being repeated. The work is very easy on the ear and shows off Abduraimov's sensitive shaping of melodies as well as his virtuosic ability. The harmony and orchestration, for me, though, weren't weighty enough to make the material stay in my ears, even though all of the music was attractive. I thought it was an odd pairing to have this follow the Prokofiev work, which comes across with far more gravity. No problem, though. It's a work that will entertain audiences. requiring some virtuosity and having themes that are easily recognizable and equally eagerly awaited when they have to return. Abduraimov's programs have led me into some new repertoire, and I will continue to follow his releases with interest.
Yeah, regarding the Prokofiev piano concertos, I had heard a few recordings of them over the years, and I never quite got them until I heard the Jean et Flambeau series, and they just sort of started sparkling to me. And I think the way he plays them, his style that's just so full of, I guess, finesse, really drew a line through them musically for me. And then they started to open up to me. Now here, Abduraimov brings a real sense of power to them. He has this real strong musicality, like you were mentioning. But he's also very lyrical, a lot of attention to dynamics and great musicality. And I liked this rendition as well. As you say, he makes all of the parts sound really pretty. And even there's some more jarring parts in other recordings that I've heard.
Prokofiev wanted to shock.
Right.
So, yeah.
But I like this rendition, and I think I'll come back and listen to it again because I just like the way that Abduraimov phrases things. And the Shor was completely new to me as well, and it's instantly enjoyable. Familiarly tonal, anyone will understand this, whether they're experienced listening to classical music. There's a real classicism to a lot of the piano lines, as you showed a hint of Baroque too, and then just loads of romantic phrasing and ideas as well. The orchestration is rich in parts, but the solo piano sticks out. It becomes really passionate in Abduraimov's phrasing. Very pretty melodic themes. If you like Tchaikovsky, Chopin, Medtner, Rachmaninoff, you're sure to enjoy this. I guess it's charming because it's a contemporary work, but it reminds us of so many different things from the past, and it's just easy to enjoy.
All right, our third recording tonight is Errollyn Wallen, Orchestral Works, performed by the BBC Concert Orchestra, conducted by John Andrews, and there are a few soloists on the way. I'll mention them when they come up. Now, Wallen is British, born in Belize, which borders Mexico to the north and Guatemala to the west and south. Along with being a successful composer, Wallen has been a part of a dance school, music conservatoire, university, and alternative comedy band.
Oh.
Keyboard playing, and she's run a recording studio too. So she's a very active person. Tracks 1 through 9, Dances for Orchestra 2023. This is a riotous virtuoso showcase, according to the notes. I don't know if I'd call it riotous, but we'll get to that. Wallen has tried to, quote, resist being part of any movement or ism. Always a good strategy, I would say. Allowing herself to engage with the, again a quote, the vast history behind us and the various cultures and ideas swirling around us. Good, that's what music should be. It should really be taking on all of the cultural ideas that we hear around us. In fact, if you think back to Gershwin's music, that's exactly what he did. He heard all this popular music, jazz, in New York when he was growing up and put it all into his music. And Wallen sort of does the same thing with modern music. She draws inspiration from everything, including jazz, blues, spirituals, musicals, pop, and classical music. And I'm going to also say minimalism in classical music too, because we hear a bit of that, though not a lot of it, on this album.
So much so, when I was listening to this, if I didn't know they were all by the same composer, I would have thought this was a collection of different composers on here.
That's true. She does go into a lot of different styles, even in these dances.
Yes.
They kind of sound like they're not all by the same composer. It's a quality that composers like Takemitsu had, Toru Takemitsu. He would compose in different styles. And he really, sometimes it was a little scary how different he could sound from piece to piece. And this is a little bit like that too. Now, track 1 is Dance 1, and all of these dances are pretty brief. The layering on the rhythms has the sense of a minimalist piece in this particular dance. At around the 20-second mark, a melody is heard, though, so there's more to this than simple minimalism. It's an interesting mixture of styles. Let's hear it. I'm going to start it just a little bit in. Now, one thing you'll notice right away is that Wallen has a really good ear for orchestration, and her music just keeps changing its colors. It's almost like looking through one of those kaleidoscope tubes that you had when you were a kid. There's a trumpet melody at around the 1 minute mark, and I'm hearing a lot of John Adams' Short Ride in a Fast Machine in the rhythm. It's a gorgeous recording, by the way. Each instrument seems to have its own individual space on the recording. The ending of this particular dance is inconclusive. Track 2 is Dance 2. This starts with a fluttering flute accompanied by sighing, pulsing brass. That pulsing continues in the background throughout. Let's hear this in action. Again, great sense of orchestral color in these works. The piece progresses by sudden juxtapositions, as is the way with many contemporary composers. There are some interesting rhythmic quirks in the texture, and around the 2 minute and 10-second mark there's a long pause, leading you to believe that the dance is over, but then a more languorous, less rhythmically defined theme begins. It builds up various layers of themes and ends warmly on strings, with fluttering winds and a trombone melody heard alongside it, endings with big Hollywood chords, but then a final chord that doesn't resolve the piece. Interesting. Track 3, we have 3 dances here, dances 3 through 5. This begins with a rhythm set by pizzicati. A clarinet starts playing a syncopated staccato theme that the rest of the orchestral instruments gradually pick up. It's kind of an appealing melody on top of that. Also appealing rhythm. I really liked this particular track a lot. It has 3 dances in it. The oboe introduces a new inflection of the theme, a sort of B section or middle 8, or maybe that's the 4th dance. And then the opening themes are back. At the very end, the rhythm stops and brass are heard heralding a fanfare that leads to the next dance, which is track 4, dance 6. Here there's a melody with strings given a specific dance rhythm. It's the rhythm that Donald Fagen used on the chorus of that track IGY from The Nightfly. You remember that song?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this rhythm reminded me of that. It probably has a name. It's probably traditional in something, but I don't know what it's called. The movement is very brief and ends quickly. Track 5, Dance 7. An oboe takes the lead melody as strings play in an accompanimental counter melody. This dance is atmospheric. It's rather mysterious and calm. The melody builds up to a crescendo towards the end, with interesting changes of timbre applied to it. This dance is in a more traditional harmony, using progression rather than juxtaposition. Track 6, Dance 8. This dance is excitable in its ostinato bowed bass rhythm, with the variety of timbres playing thematic material above, causing a bit of cacophony over it. Let's hear a bit of this one. Okay, and that's half the movement right there. You'll have to visit the website to hear the rest of it. There's some harsh chords at the end of this 1 minute dance. Track 7 is Dance 9. This features a cheerful, chirpy flute melody. It's interrupted by menacing chords. Then the 33-second track ends. Track 8 is Dance 10. The opening features a reference to Handel's Sarabande from his suite in D minor. Do you know that piece? This is what it sounds like. Let's hear it. There are a lot of references to that work in there. It goes off on some harmonic tangents, though, as it goes on, always returning to that somber opening. There's a big build-up via a crescendo and thickening chord textures to the end. A sudden decrescendo introduces a horn that references the theme. It ends on strings rather diffusely. Track 9 is Dance 11 and 12. This has a big Hollywood sound at the opening, with some active minimalist layered rhythm in the various parts. At 56 seconds, the rhythm changes to a swaying feel, again reminding me of that Donald Fagen song. A trumpet plays a theme in a dotted rhythm. The rhythm then gains some extra complex material on top of it and takes on a triplet sort of Irish dance feel momentarily. Let's hear a sample of this. There's a kind of restrained joy in this. It's infectious. At the 3 minutes and 22 second mark, we hear a full-on Irish dance melody, which breaks up into patterns breaking up as water on rocks, leading to the end. Okay, so the dances are over, but we go on. Track 10 is a song called This Frame is Part of the Painting. I like the title. It's from 2019 and features mezzo-soprano Idunnu Munch. The work is a response to the work of British artist Howard Hodgkin, who lived 1932 to 2017. Wallen says, "When I first came across Hodgkin's paintings, I was instantly knocked sideways by their emotional force." Wallen explains, "These are paintings that move and dance with life." The work combines Wallen's own words and fragments of texts by Hodgkin. It's structured in 6 sections called Innocence, Solitude, Certainty, Still, Portrayal of the Artist Listening to Music, and Sunrise over Hopkins. Each section is associated with a different painting, which the program notes go into more detail about. I would suggest you look them up online somewhere. The end of the work alludes to Bird's Mass for 4 voices. The first painting is Innocence. It's got watery winds, gurgling in circling patterns, some cool diffuse brass writing that melts into winds at around the first minute. There's a lot of activity in the orchestration. We finally hear Munch enter at around the 1 minute and 55 second mark on a vocalise. She's solo without an orchestral net for a while. Then a few strands of winds come in and her vocalise turns to words. The next section represents the painting Solitude. There's actually a pause between sections, but the CD and streamed version don't separate them into different tracks. There's some ticking clock tone painting in the vocal line as clocks are referenced in the text. Painting 3 is Certainty. There's no pause separating these sections. Certainty has some powerful low-end percussion, beautifully captured on the recording. Painting 4 is apparently Still, but it doesn't feature any text. Painting 5 is Portrait of the Artist Listening to Music, and this expands the percussion. with chimes and other woody sounds. I've decided to sample this particular part of the piece. Let's hear a little bit of it. This is a fairly long section comparatively and features the vocalist slowly unfolding the text. Painting 6, the last one, is Sunrise over Hopkins. This is probably the most poignant section of the piece. It's got a viola, I think, soloing in the background, setting an English pastoral feel as the vocalist sings the Wallen-penned text. It ends on a high note and a big chord, which is unresolved. Track 11, Fondant, 2018. The source of the inspiration of this work is cake. I don't think any composer has ever written a piece about cake before. Wallen says, "Cake has been my inspiration and guide since school days." Fun fact, mine too. She says the work, quote, aspires to the condition of cake. You can work that out for yourself, listeners. It's playful and upbeat with snippets of the opening phrase from Happy Birthday, just discernible. So the piece is lively rhythmically and has a sense of disorder to its rushing sections. It's an interesting listen, though. Wallen has an interesting ear for orchestration. A dance-like syncopated rhythm comes out at the 40-second mark. We hear pretty frequent slapsticks in the piece, 2 sticks being hit together. And they signal changes of section, I think. There's a cheeky rushing section at the 1 minute and 30-second mark, followed by a popular theme and a brief flute section. At 2 minutes and 17 seconds, we start hearing the melody to the words Happy Birthday. It's rather nice that it's just that she didn't quote the entire song. I'm going to play the section where that happens, see if you can pull it out. So you only get the words Happy Birthday outlined there, right towards the end in case you didn't hear it. The fragment passes quickly and the work comes to a rhythmically tumultuous ending. It's an interesting piece. Track 12, The World's Weather, composed in 2000. This is the earliest work on the album. Wallen describes it as a celebratory piece, and the score is headed by a quote from E.B. White that's simply the glory of everything. The piece moves from an ominous opening to a glorious dance-like finale via an impassioned dialogue with the orchestra. It starts quietly, with deep bass and a harp plucking mysterious harmonies. Oddly tuned strings come in the first minute. Again, the textures change quickly, and there are a lot of timbral pleasures for the ear to pick out. At 3 minutes and 50 seconds, we're hearing stark repeating patterns in the strings as the deep bass rolls below. There's a really nice string shimmer over growling bass at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, then a trumpet sings out over pizzicato strings playing an odd rhythm. Brass fanfares accompany an ominous percussion-led crescendo, then the music gets more forthright in its tone. Violin and harp play a sweet melody at the 6 minute mark, which the flute repeats. There seems to be a tug of war going on between more severe and lighter forces, especially by the 6th minute, as the two styles are juxtaposed. We hear the work's first serene section in the 7th minute. I'd sample it, but the serenity really comes from the release of what we've heard up to now, as much as from the orchestration. The bass drum rolls really make the room shake. They're heard under harmonized brass in the 8th minute. There's a big build-up of a hesitating rhythm via a crescendo into the 11th minute. Brass play a sort of fanfare as we head towards the end of the 11-minute mark. They repeat it as other material makes rite of spring-like circles around in different rhythms. At 12 minutes, all of the rhythms snap into place for the approach to the end of the work, which ends with a serene chord and a big bass drum hit. Okay, those are the multiple rhythms I called the rite of spring-like passage. I didn't go to the end of the movement, but that's towards the end. Track 13, by Giss and by Saint Charity. This features Ruby Hughes singing soprano. Ruby Hughes is the dedicatee of the work, which sets a text sung by Ophelia in Shakespeare's Hamlet, Act 4, Scene 5. I wonder if that word is pronounced Giss or Gis. I don't know. The text is about betrayal and calls shame upon men who bed women with false promises of marriage. The word shame is used throughout the work, usually chanted. The music itself is pretty icy. It's a dramatic work, though, and effective. There are moments of repose as Ophelia fluctuates between anger and a gentle sorrow. I'd like to sample a bit of this. Let's hear from 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The work ends with cascading downward patterns in the strings. Track 14, Postcard from Magdalena. This features Miwa Rosso on the solo cello. This is dedicated to the film director Margaret Williams, who lived 1950 to 2024. It was commissioned by the BBC as part of a series of postcards from contemporary composers during the COVID pandemic, and is in two brief sections, wistful and joyous. This very brief work is for solo cello. It starts slowly, then engages more challenging lines with double stops, and it ends on a double-stopped pizzicato. It's very short, and I'll have you sample that for yourself. Track 15, Mighty River, written in 2007. This is dedicated to Wallen's great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother, that's 6 greats. This work was commissioned to mark the bicentenary of the abolition of the Slave Trade Act. Wallen writes, quote, "It is an innate human instinct to be free, just as it is a law of nature that the river should rush headlong to the sea. This is the concept behind Mighty River." Unquote. The work references the spirituals Deep River and Go Down Moses, and both opens and closes with the hymn Amazing Grace. You can hear that right away. The movement of the rhythm evokes flowing river water, but Wallen also states that the perpetual motion of the music carries with it the cries and echoes of human hearts and voices that are singing out of suffering, repentance, humility, and hope. We hear Wallen's voice at the end of the work. The hymn remains unresolved at the end. The piece itself begins with a quote of Amazing Grace in the Winds, playing in unison. A minimalist repeated chord rhythm is set up, again reminding me of John Adams' style. Brass eventually come in with gleaming crescendoing tones like the rays of the sun. It sounds grand and positive. I'm going to sample that. This is from around the 2-minute mark. The rhythm briefly alters but goes back to pulsing repeated chords in a new harmony briefly. The original chord returns and winds flutter over it, each coming in with different melodic characteristics, the brass actually harmonized. The music quietens down over time, and in the 5th minute we start hearing expressive strings and muted distant brass. The rhythm is back, and we have more kaleidoscopic melodic material up top. The chord pulse continues, but the chords themselves start varying, with brass accented by timpani playing over the chords. By the 8th minute, the music has decrescendoed, and the rhythm is now taken over by individual wind instruments. The cello plays a continuous melody, the first I believe we've heard in this work. The violin then takes it over, playing over some competing timbral combinations. Percussion gets a sort of melodic ostinato briefly in the 9th minute, then the rhythm disappears and the various sections of the orchestra emote. Brass plays a sort of chorale in the 10th minute. A gentle harp plays an ostinato arpeggio in the 11th minute, calming the music down, and the strings respond in kind. In the 12th minute, a steady rhythm returns, but now with some arpeggiated patterns carrying it. We start hearing Amazing Grace in the violins, now playing serenely, seeking the heavens, as the bass instruments start roiling in the low end, playing a lumbering theme. At just about 14 minutes, there's a steady string rhythm reminiscent of Steve Reich's Different Trains. Winds bubble over that. The rhythm finally stops, and at 50 minutes and 20 seconds, we hear the Amazing Grace melody played on a solo French horn. The piece ends on a serene harmony. The dances are all highly entertaining, with their quirkiness and lively rhythms expertly put across by the BBC Concert Orchestra, who sound dedicated to the music. The performances also have a sense of being counted, but with music like this that isn't rooted in popular music rhythms, that approach works fine. In fact, it allows much of the orchestral detail to emerge. The album goes by fast, the works themselves are enjoyable and pretty easy on the ear. Wallen uses more modern harmonies in well-orchestrated ways so that her harsher harmonies aren't off-putting. In By Gis and by St. Charity, the harmonies are used for dramatic effect. I liked the dances and the final work, Mighty River, the best, but this album went by quickly and enjoyably. Despite its length, I was able to hear it all the way through without stopping. Wallen is a composer to keep one's ear on.
Yeah, Wallen seems to compose in a variety of styles, as you mentioned, and I guess that's a reflection of her kind of eclectic life experiences from what you read about her biography there. She's skillful in painting with orchestral colors and making sweeping lines through the orchestra. I enjoyed the dances for orchestra for the variety of rhythmic feels and tempo and different instrumentation and tones in each movement. They're all quite unique. Mighty River has some cinematic sections between the spiritual themes, and the world's weather was interesting and constantly changing. All of those really appealed to me. On the other hand, the 2 vocal pieces didn't appeal to me much at all.
I think it's that vocal style. I'm kind of not too crazy about it either.
But as I said, there's a lot to like in what she does for the variety, and then just the skill with orchestral colors. I thought it was all quite enjoyable. Another contemporary composer to keep our ears on. Over on the jazz side, we've got a lot of variety as well. We're going to start out with a piano trio. German pianist Christian Pabst and his recording Rhythm Riot on JazzSick Records. It came out April 4th. Christian Pabst is a pianist and film composer. He grew up in a small German village close to the French border, listening to his brother play their home organ, and that made him want to take piano lessons. He got turned onto jazz and studied jazz piano and film music at conservatories in Amsterdam, Paris, and Copenhagen. He made his debut recording, Days of Infinity, on Challenge Records back in 2011, and this is his 6th release as a leader. So on this recording, Christian Pabst on the piano with all of his original compositions, Andre Nenze on bass, he's also German, Eric Kugler on drums, he's Dutch. This was recorded at Loft, Köln, Germany, mixed and mastered by Christian Heck at Tonart Studios in Germany. And the recording's going to start out with a tune called Incoming Signal. Pabst starts it out solo for 8 measures with chords and left-hand bass figures that dig in. You can feel the swing even before the bass and drums join in for another round. That sequence pretty much makes up the basis for the tune. Pabst works a right-hand melody idea and starts off exploratory improvisations. It's kind of what we heard with the pianist we like, Emil Wiklitsky, who does a lot with a minimal starting point and just expands upon it. Let's check out the beginning of this recording. Nens is really digging in with the walking bass. They work up the energy with some nice tremolos from Pabst, and then take it down from the heavy chord energy into some more right-hand melody ideas. Let's check out that transition. It goes on for a bit more with a nice drum flourish from Cougar at the end of the tune. Now there are two tunes on this recording that have a Japan reference, specifically Buddhism, so I'm wondering if Pabst is Japanophile or into Buddhism or something. The first one here is track 2, Mount Rakan, which is a mountain in Oita Prefecture, and it's famous for the Rakanji, a Soto Zen sect temple.
I didn't know about this, and I've actually practiced Zen here. So
yeah, and Rakandra is one of these really difficult kanjis to write.
Right.
Anyway, this has got a solo piano opening. It's rhythmic but sparse in a meditative way, fittingly, with alternating E-flat and D notes while chords ring around it. Next is a more ringing chord section that becomes even more spare and minimal with soft cymbal and hi-hat sounds from Cougar that will bring in Nenza to take center stage on the bass. Let's hear this one get going. Nenza is going to really make it sing out with clear articulation, sliding pitches, and interesting rhythms. So let's hear some of that. Pabst is back with the chiming chord riff from there. After a pause, piano and bass work a synced theme together nicely. Pabst gets some improvisations, always keeping it rhythmic over the tight groove by Cougar. They return to the bass and piano theme, and the chiming chord idea takes it to soft ringing final spaced out piano chords to end it. Track 3 is 24/7. Cougar kicks into an 8-measure intro with some cool clicks and fills under the rhythmic chords. The tune itself has two contrasting halves, a high and light 8-measure line from Pabst with some bluesiness that gets syncopated energy to a held note. That repeats, and tremolos build it into the next section with cool angular left-hand piano and bass lines. Right there at the end of that section, it sounds like there's a one extra 2-beat measure that gets Pabst launched into his solo. He has fun choppy chords and bluesy ringing ideas with zippier lines mixed in. Let's jump back in and hear some of that. It's a lot of fun, and Nenza's bass groove is really thumping underneath. Pabst continues on to a return of the left-hand and angular bass line section, and then the first melody section, so we hear them in reverse order of the beginning. The ending has a vamp section for some drumming that sounds like hands on the toms, and then a cute stretched-out final piano cadence. Track 4 is Sky, a sparse and haunting rhythmic piano opening. It sounds like little figures from a double harmonic A major scale. Then bowed bass lines enter and work into a sunnier idea. Let's check this out. As it goes on, Pabst and Ninza will have some intriguing improvised exchanges of lines, so let's hear a little bit of that as well. In the final melody section, the bass echoes the piano phrases and it works to a slowed ending. Here's our next Japanese Buddhist reference, Kinnara, and this word refers to the heavenly musicians in the Buddhist tradition. You often see them in Buddhist art floating above with some instruments. This starts off with a super groove of drums and bass ostinato. Pabst explores some rhythmic chordal improvisations working up to the melody. It's a 24-measure idea with lifting chord changes to a break and a final 8-measure section that pushes off with neat syncopation. Again there, and then Pabst is off with improvisations. It's a super exciting solo. They get back to another round of the melody, and when they get to the last section, it's Cougar's time for a drum spotlight. So let's jump in from that point. Track 6 is Enigma. A rubato ringing solo piano start leads to cymbal decoration and then rhythmic muted and swelling repeated bass notes. This is hard to get a picture of in a sample, so we'll jump in at about 2 minutes where a push into an exposition of the chordal sequence dissipates into more free interaction. that freedom congeals into a driving swing, and then Pabst is off on running lines, so let's check some of that out too. Nenza will bring back the pulsing bass into another time through the chordal passage we heard before. The ending opens into a brighter rubato piano idea over high bowed bass and final sparse ringing piano figures. And the recording ends up with track 7, Encore. Cougar gets it going with 8 measures of a clicky Latin groove. Bass and piano are in for a couple rounds with percussive chords and tremolos that build up to a 16-measure melody idea from Pabst, and he's off bursting with ideas from there. It keeps going on without running out of ideas and getting more and more rhythmic. Let's hear a little bit more. After a final big chord climax, Nenza walks it to an ending with softer staccato piano chord punctuations. And that's the recording. It's a short recording at 37 minutes, but it packs a lot of piano trio excitement in. The rhythms vary from driving high-speed swing to even-beat rhythms, often introduced by Pabst's chords, and Latiny cymbal grooves from Cougar. There are dreamy melody ideas and the intriguing bass features for Mount Rakan and Sky. In other spots, Pabst doesn't need much of a melody structure to get started on endless improvised ideas, and this trio really shines when they are free-flowing in an exploratory direction. Punchy and clear bass lines and melodies from Nenza and exciting drumming from Cougar throughout, and through everything there's a sense of rhythmic playfulness, if not quite Riot level.
You know, this album is titled Rhythm Riot, but I don't think this album is the Rhythm Riot that the title indicates. It goes through a lot of moods, actually, including something approaching a light avant-garde on track 6, which I was kind of interested to hear. That track was called Enigma. Really only track 5, Kimnara, and the last track, Encore, get into some rhythm-driven playing. Kinmara being more in the non-traditional jazz camp. Basically, the album's made up of mid-tempo compositions that allow Pabst to show his stuff, and in that way, it's a calling card. I kind of heard this as a calling card kind of album. His playing comes across to me as insistent, using a lot of chord accents in his improvisations, and just a bit of artiness in track 4, Sky. There's a bit of classical minimalism in his playing as well. This is a pleasant listen for the most part. I rather enjoyed it.
Yeah, interesting. It just seems to me like they're bursting to get out into some more free directions. And so, yeah, I enjoyed that energy, yeah.
Yeah, I could hear that.
All right, next recording, also trio format, but not piano, the Hammond organ.
Our favorite.
Mitch Towne is the organist. He's recording Refuge on, I guess, his own label, Cross Towne, Towne Records. This came out April 1st. Mitch Towne is a keyboardist who has played as a sideman in a variety of styles, pop, R&B, rock, and jazz. In jazz, he's played with big names such as Tom Scott, Ryan Kaiser, Dave Stryker, and Jerry Bergonzi. In 2015, Towne played organ on the track Push for the album Velvet Portraits by Terrace Martin, which was nominated for a 2016 Grammy for Best R&B Album. This is his debut recording as a leader, and he's chosen the organ trio format and a program of mostly original compositions. So Mitch Towne on the Hammond organ, Tetsuya Nishiyama on guitar. He's originally from Nagoya, Japan, and he studied at Northern Illinois University. Jeffrey Johnson is on the drums. And we're going to get started with a Towne original, Wolverine. Things get going with some driving swing on this tune. The angular melody gives the impression of jumping on something that's already moving. There's a repeating 13-measure section and then a 4-measure section that we'll hear come back as a little transition between the solos. The structure had me stumped for a while listening to this, but when you get used to the 24-measure progression pattern of the solos, you realize that that little tag section is actually the start of a new time around that. Let's hear it get started into a guitar solo from Nishiyama. Nice snappy guitar phrases over a great organ bass line and drum groove. Let's jump back in from the transition phrase and hear some of Towne's Hammond playing on this as well. Really poppin'. Johnson gets a go on drums too, with some injection of a melody riff from the others, and it wraps up with a repeat of the original melody section. Track 2, Refuge, a slower loping groove on the title track. Now, I don't know how this is written, but it feels like alternating 3-beat and 5-beat measures for an 8-measure intro, then an organ melody following the same rhythmic pattern, and then an 8-measure section switching up to 4/4, and then a return to the first section. From there, Nishiyama's off on a solo over a chilled 4/4 groove with walking organ bass. Let's check it out. He gets a long time to develop his ideas, and the guitar solo in extended phrases with some nice bluesy hints. Let's hear how he wraps everything up. Towne follows with an organ solo, a nice sense of space building up tension gradually, and some cool syncing up with Johnson on spontaneous rhythmic ideas. They get back to the multi-meter melody and hold out some vamped chords at the end for Johnson to fill things out. Track 3, another Towne original, Better Now Than Never at All. A clicky, relaxed R&B groove for this one. Towne has some great syncopated bass lines percolating under the 40-measure organ melody. After the melody, Nishiyama solos first, starting out with chilled-out, shorter rhythmic ideas and working up into some springy trill licks. Let's check out Towne's solo that has some cool double-time runs in it. Yeah, nice funky feel, and they take it through the melody again with a little extended ending. Track 4, also by Mitch Towne, Ode to Kenny, and that's pianist Kenny Kirkland, and we're going to have one of his tunes as the only non-original in the following track. Johnson gets this going with a tom fill into 8 measures of an R&B groove. There's a pickup phrase into a bluesy minor melody and funky organ bass lines. Nishiyama keeps things subtle with his guitar backing. It goes around a 16-measure idea twice, then a contrasting 8-measure section with unison guitar and organ lines, and a 4-measure softening transition to the start of a solo from Nishiyama. Nishiyama will keep things cool in his solo. There's a little lick that sounds almost like Softly as in a Morning Sunrise on the Way. Let's hear a little bit of his playing. Nice pickup line there into Towne's organ solo. After his solo, they continue on with the last contrasting section of the melody, and then it vamps to a fade with improvised trades from guitar and organ. Track 5, this is a Kenny Kirkland tune, Steepian Faith. This is from his 1991 self-titled debut recording on Verve Records. The first 16 measures of this have a tricky syncopated organ chord melody, and then in the B section, Johnson switches up the beat from Latin to swing and back under Nishiyama's guitar lines. Towne is back for the last section, and they go around the pattern again. Let's hear it get going. Towne has lots of tasty licks in his solo on this one, and Johnson's rhythmic reactions and his hits are also really great. Let's hear a little bit of that. Nishiyama follows with a solo that starts subtly and builds up energy before they get back to the quirky Kirkland melody and an energetic ending. Track 6, back to Towne's originals, Some Work of Noble Note May Yet Be Done. Another unique sounding tune here. It's in 5/4 and starts with a 16-measure intro. Towne's phrasing of the melody is interesting, giving it a little skip-like feel. It reaches a syncopated climax at 16 measures and sounds like it's going to go around again, but that's just the final 4 measures that come down for a soft start to an organ solo. And let's hear how the organ builds up to a big climax in the solo here. Nishiyama gets a nice build up in his solo on this one too, but I thought he could have been louder in the mix at the climax compared to the big organ chords. After the final melody section, it gets a long outro starting softly and building up with Johnson's drum energy. And the recording ends up with the final Towne original Act As If. Johnson kicks in this bouncy and bluesy minor tune. The melody is a 16-measure repeating idea with nice drumming underneath. Towne's off soloing first there. Nishiyama has springing rhythms in his swinging phrases, and after going through the melody again, guitar and organ trade phrases to the end. Let's check out the ending of the tune and the album. Well, we love the Hammond organ and especially organ trios. I've certainly picked a lot of them for our episodes. Where Mitch Towne stands out is with unique original compositions that go beyond the usual bluesy and shuffle type material. All the tunes have unique grooves, sometimes with different meters, and the rhythmic feels stand out from Johnson's fine drumming and Towne's own funky bass lines. Sometimes they're like an electric bass in the details they have. Nishiyama is a tasteful guitarist who always sticks with musical ideas instead of showing off, and he has a good sense of swing and a clear tone. Only 7 tunes here, but that means everyone has time to really develop the solos with enough space, and I found them all engaging and going someplace musically. I hope Mitch Towne records another organ trio album soon.
Yeah, I like this too. I called it like more straightforward organ trio jazz, but now listening to what you had to say about it, I may have to rethink that because I got to listen in for more of the details. You know, there's nothing not to like on the album, of course. Towne sets good nighttime moods in the slower tracks, and I liked Tetsuya Nishiyama's guitar tone. That was really what I was zeroing in on. He was nice and clean and sort of really tight. He maintains that throughout. The band has a good sense of swing in the quicker tracks like the first and last. I think this is a really appealing album, and I was kind of looking to see if there was a CD available, and it looks like you might be able to get one from his website, but it looks like you have to write to him. So I may look into that one day. We'll have to see.
Yeah, everything on the surface level goes by with good grooves, and then when I started trying to figure out the structures and things, I was like, oh, there's a little bit more here that's unique underneath.
Yeah, maybe I wasn't picking up on that so much, so I didn't. It takes time to really, you know, because the first time I'm not always getting that because I'm not really a jazz listener all the time, you know, so it takes time for it to kind of sink in. I may have to hear this a few more times, really. I certainly liked it. I liked the tone of it and all. And
interesting recording.
There's a lot to like on this. It sounds like it's going to repay repeated listenings.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. All right, our last recording, drummer and composer Leon Anderson's Live at Snug Harbor. This is on Outside in Music. Came out April 4th. Leon Anderson is a drummer from New Orleans, Louisiana, who trained as a classical percussionist. He received a BA in music education at Louisiana Tech University in 1992, and he completed his graduate studies at Southeastern Louisiana University just outside of New Orleans. He's a professor and director of the Jazz Studies program at Florida State University. His resume as a sideman includes a lot of famous names in multiple genres: Donald Harrison, Judy Collins, Wycliffe Gordon, James Moody, Rufus Reid, Henry Mancini, Art Farmer, Jason Marsalis, and even the Temptations. That's quite diverse.
Yeah, wow.
The press release for this recording says that when Anderson began to play more frequently in New Orleans, it became his goal to perform at Snug Harbor, a well-known restaurant and live music venue in New Orleans, and this goal was realized under the vision of Ellis Marsalis and Victor Goines. His recording career goes back to 1998 with Goines on the album Joe's Blues, and this is his debut as a leader. As a jazz drummer, his influences are Art Blakey, Elvin Jones, Philly Joe Jones, Kenny Clark, and Brian Blade. On this recording, Leon Anderson on the drums and all original compositions, Oscar Rossignoli on piano, originally from Honduras, now based in New Orleans, Rodney Jordan on bass, who's played with Anderson for 20 years, John Michael Bradford on the trumpet, a young New Orleans trumpeter who we heard on a recording we both really loved back in episode 135, Top Down Winds and Sax, and that was saxophonist Connor Stewart's Whoa.
Oh, yeah.
That was a real surprise recording.
I'm still looking for a CD of that. I tried to get in touch with him, but he responded, and then that was it. I asked him for the CD. He didn't write back.
And we've got Ricardo Pascal on tenor sax, originally one of Anderson's students at Florida State University. Now, I don't have the recording and engineering credits. I'm just working off a press release of information, and this isn't up on Outside in Music's website yet, so I'd like to give credit to the recording engineers, but I can't do that right now. So the recording gets underway with the first Anderson original, PJs. And the notes say, a melody that simply came to mind after Anderson watched an animated television show that, while humorous, caused him to stop and reflect. Anderson gets things underway here with an 8-measure drum intro. The horn melody is hard swinging, reaching out to 36 measures with an unexpected harmonic shift in the 19th measure that really caught my ear, and Pascal is launched into a tenor sax solo. Let's hear this recording get started. Keeps pushing it into some high shrieks and flurries of notes and hands the solo baton to Bradford with no loss of momentum, and he blows on and on with lots of ideas. Rossignoli follows with a piano solo and lots of percussive energy. After another run through the melody, things get extended with some simultaneous trumpet and sax improvisations, and then the groove changes up to like a New Orleans street celebration feel, so I'd like to sample some of that fun too towards the end of the tune. Coming up soon, and the crowd really cheers. What a lot of great live energy here. This whole recording has really long tracks. Everyone gets to open up. It's really hard to decide what to sample on each tune, and I'm only giving you just a small snippet of all the great stuff on here.
Yeah, the energy is high throughout this album.
Yeah,
it's really amazing.
Track 2, Little Miss Ariel. The rhythm section has an 8-measure intro. The horn melody is very sunny and playfully phrased. See if the chord changes remind you of anything. It has a repeating 8-measure idea into a longer 20-measure middle section and then back to the opening section. Rodney Jordan will be up for a bass solo first with nimble fingers on triplet figures and skittering lines and a warm tone. Bradford is next, and here's the answer to the similar chord progression over the first part of the melody. Really nice solo, and he started it out with the opening to the melody of September in the Rain, which sounds like it was the inspiration for the first section of Anderson's tune. Pascal has a tonally intense tenor sax solo, and Rossignoli brings some Ellingtonian class to his piano solo. In the repeat of the melody at the end, Rossignoli adds some more Duke-like cascades behind the horns. Track 3, Lil Froggy's Blues, was written, the notes say, about 25 years ago when Anderson's first son was a toddler, and the melody came to his mind when he watched his son learn stages of walking, and rather than crawling, his son would hop around. Well, this is a 12-bar blues. They go around the customary 2 times. The end of the horn melody phrase is a held-out tension-building note. Pascal up for the first solo there, and he gets into some fun outside wandering. Bradford's solo is bluesy and gutsy, and it sounds like he has a lot of Roy Hargrove influence in his playing. The crowd approves. Rossignoli is rhythmically playful in his piano solo with some nice percussive chords, and Rodney Jordan gets a go on bass, impressing with speedy lines and double stops. The horns and piano do some trading with Anderson's drums, and that's where I'm going to jump back in to catch the live excitement. That transitions to an extended drum solo from Anderson, showing off a lot of technique and different tones. It goes on for several minutes before the blues melody is back with final phrase repeats, and this tune stretches to over 12 minutes. Track 4, Vengeance. This is a really cool hard bop minor modal tune. It begins with a unique 6/8 hypnotic groove on the intro to set up the horn melody, but don't get too comfortable because it's going to change up to 5/8 and then back again before it's over. Check this out. Bradford's off from there on a solo that skillfully navigates the rhythmic change-ups with some great ideas. Pascal follows, working up to passionate cries, and Rossignoli drives the crowd wild with the percussive climax of his piano solo on this one, so let's check out his playing. Are back from there into a vamp for Anderson to work up energy around the drum kit to the end, with the horns joining back in for a big crowd-pleasing finish. Track 5 is called Understanding, and the notes say this was composed for his wife. It's a ballad, and Bradford gets the spotlight, showing off his lyrical side and a quick vibrato. A pretty 20-measure melody with nice harmonies. It starts and ends with the same 4-measure phrase. Bradford's off on improvisations from there, and Rossignoli also gets some tasteful solo piano time before he returns. This was a nice cool down from the high-energy first half of the recording. Track 6 is 88 to 1621. Another hard bopping minor tune with start and stop excitement in the horn lines and cool groove change-ups before Pascal is hurled into a burning tenor sax solo. There's some really burning solos all around on this track. Next is Bradford, and then Rossignoli and Rodney Jordan on bass as well, before Anderson gets another extended drum solo. Well, we'll only be able to check out some of it, so let's jump in for the ending. return from there with the dangerous melody.
Yeah, I definitely would have sampled that too. And that stood out for me right away. It was really explosive.
Track 7 is Essence of the Soldier, and the notes say this was written in memory of Anderson's father, who served in the military as a chief warrant officer and conductor of the 156th Army Band. This has a unique groove. To me, it sounds like it's in a slow, even 6-beat meter. There's an 8-measure intro with snappy bass from Jordan, and Anderson is decorating with some subtle soldier-sounding snare work. The lyrical horn melody has a first section with the same feel, and then gets some stretched 4-beat kind of phrases. On this one, Pascal and Bradford will trade off improvisations and work into some really cool simultaneous rhythmic playing. Let's hear a little bit of that. Rossignoli follows on piano, and then Rodney Jordan on bass before the horn melody returns to end it up. And track 8, which will be the final track on the CD, is called The Bruz of 82. That's Alpha Delta 2, but I assume it's supposed to sound like the number. Sassy, shuffling 12-bar blues with an 8-measure intro. Let's check it out into Bradford getting going on playing the blues. I hate to stop this as it's going on here. Too much fun. Pascal will follow, building tension on long lines on the sax into some dirtier blues ideas. Rossignoli gets the last solo before the horns are back to wrap it up with the melody, and Anderson calls out the players' names as the crowd cheers. Now on the digital release, you get 2 alternate takes so you can compare the solos and see how they're different. For example, Bradford doesn't quote September in the Rain on this alternate version of Little Miss Ariel. First we get PJs, and they say alternate takes set 1 for both of these. Track 9 is PJs. I'll leave you to check that out. And track 10 is Little Miss Ariel. Now, I didn't give you a sample of Jordan's bass solos throughout the recording, which I should have. So let's just check out his solo on this last alternate take. Melodic and really great articulation there. This is one of the most exciting live albums I've heard in a long time. The band is really on fire. You just can't get this kind of energy and risk-taking in solos while someone's staring at soundproofing in a studio.
Yeah, not very inspiring.
Anderson's compositions are mostly in the post-bop pocket that we love so much, but they have interesting twists and turns to surprise you throughout the program. And there are some tricky meter and groove switch-ups, all handled in stride by the band. Great technical drumming and lots of excitement in the extended drum solos. Jordan and Rossignoli round out the tight rhythm section with solos of their own that show off their personalities. And Pascal and Bradford sound great together, each reaching and taking chances for exciting solos. With the alternate takes, there's 90 minutes of great live music on this recording. This is a must-hear, and you'll wish you were there when it was recorded. And I've yet to say this for anything, but this will probably be a strong contender for the best of the year list, even though we're only 1/3 of the way through the year.
I actually said the same thing at the end. I was really knocked out by this, and this is on my short list as well. The performances have an electricity to them. The sense that the band stepped out more because they were playing live in a legendary club is clearly felt. There's a sense of hot spotlights and booze. The recording itself doesn't separate out the instruments as well as some live performances, but that's probably a good thing, as it might have added to the excitement of listening to this show. The piano actually sounds a bit distorted during the hotter tracks, but in the context, you just go with it as part of the overall sound. Anderson himself is propulsive on drums, hitting hard and generating a lot of excitement, especially in his solo on 88 to 1621, which you sampled. I mean, That really knocked me out too. It was really high energy. And that's a rather special track where everyone's on fire, really. You should just sample that all the way through. You get the sense that this gig meant a lot to Anderson. The band live up to the standard he sets, both John Michael Bradford and Ricardo Pascal playing hot. Both have incredible solos on 88 to 1621, showing real stamina in their full-on energetic solos, as does pianist Oscar Rossignoli on the same track. Tracks like 88 to 1621 are only possible live. Like you said, you can't get that kind of energy in a studio. Bradford actually gets a bit of a Louis Armstrong vibe going at the end of track 1, PJs, with its New Orleans swing. In fact, Bradford consistently gets enthusiastic applause after his solos, indicating that he was really on that night. They all were, but he seemed to have won the crowd over.
He gets better as the program goes on, I thought, too. I think his chops got fully warmed up and set in.
Yeah, the tracks are on the long side, as you said, and it's just as well as the extended solos have a lot of energy and are worth their length. There's some hot playing in there. The crowd are obviously thrilled by what they're hearing. And so was I at home. I'm going to have to pick this up pretty soon. Records with this kind of energy are so rare in the 21st century, and for that reason, I mean, this is almost automatically on our year-end lists. We have to see what else. I can't imagine like 10 other albums are going to come out that we're going to like better than this, but it could happen if it's the most amazing year in jazz ever, but we'll have to see.
I wrote about the sound quality that it's quite good for a live recording. I've heard more polished live recordings, but I certainly often hear much worse than this. Here, the balance at least is really spot on. And overall, the tone of the instruments is captured well. I thought the piano and bass are captured well. Maybe the piano clips a little bit because they weren't expecting him to get that much into it. But that's not a bad thing, really.
I think if they had managed like a really polished sound, that it wouldn't have kind of come across with this kind of excitement, too. There's something, it's like distorted guitars in rock and roll. You hear that kind of rawness and you just you're really getting engaged.
It all sounds fine. Now, my only rant on this is about the sales of the physical media, right? Amazon US has this on CD discounted at $13.99.
Very
reasonable.
If you're
in the US, you should grab it right now. In Japan, Amazon Japan wants to soak us 3,093 yen. Come on, give us a break. The yen's so weak already. Why don't we get the discount
I know,
too?
right? Yeah, I don't know. That's a ridiculous price, though. I'm going to have to pick this up from Amazon US with a bunch of other stuff to kind of reduce the shipping cost, let's say.
All right, that's going to wrap things up for episode 208. And we've got a plan for episode 209. So what's on the classical menu, Mike?
Well, do you remember the Capsper girls? We heard them, I guess it was 2 years ago now. I'll have to look that up. Singing songs called Brunettes, which are kind of shepherd songs.
Right. Yeah, I remember that album cover.
That one had the album cover with the four sheep's heads on instead of their faces, which I thought was really cute. And the album itself was interspersed with sheep sounds, which is pretty interesting. Which kind of makes me not listen to it as much because it's a really good album, but it was cute, but I really wish they hadn't done that. It's a great record. Anyway, this time they come out with an album called Vox Feminae. This is their follow-up to that. And it's all mostly women composers from the Baroque era. So it's going to be Barbara Strozzi and others. There are a few men on there too. But it's all unknown composers except for Strozzi. And I'm really looking forward to hearing this because they made a great sound. We also have another album of 19th century French music for flute and piano by women. Did you get all that? It's an album called Les Étoiles Invisibles by the Baldo Corona duo. And this is on Da Vinci Classics, our friends over at Da Vinci Classics, who just got written up in Fanfare magazine. So, yeah, check that out. It's they talk about the company. I think it's in the latest issue. So, be sure to read that. So we'll be talking about that next week. And then we have, for our contemporary composer, Roberto Sierra.
Oh, right. I remember him.
Puerto Rican composer. And we heard his orchestra works also in the past. And this time is going to be chamber and piano music. This might be even more of an adventurous listen. Sierra isn't all Caribbean rhythms, although he has a lot of that in his music. He's another one who writes in different styles, sort of like Errollyn Wallen, but in a totally different way that she does. So we'll be hearing that too.
All right. On the jazz side, we've got a little French thing to start out with guitarist Romain Pilon. We've heard him before, and this is his new recording called Open Roads. And he's got some guests on there, Alexis Vallée on vibraphone, and there's some trumpet on there too. Then we're going to go to Spain and hear a quintet called Smack Dab with their recording Pulse. This is on Fresh Sound New Talent, and the guest pianist is Dave Kokoski, who we always like to hear. So check out some Spanish players. And then we'll go down under to Australia and check out trumpeter Lachlan McKenzie's new release on ABC Jazz called Departures. So it's going to be a real international jazz episode. You can catch all those recordings. I'll have them up on a Deezer playlist shortly after this episode is published, and we'll put a link to that on our Facebook page as well. Any final words for this episode, Mike?
I want to go to Snug Harbor. That's my final word.
I see myself down there enjoying a night of jazz with some New Orleans food and some drinks.
That'd be so good. You can come close by listening to that album, though, that Leon Anderson album. Really great.
It really puts you in a good mood. All right. Thanks as always to Fast Signs of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. And we'll be back again next week with episode 209. So until then, keep listening and we'll see you again next time.